We're going to stay on this right now as we've invited two people to join us, opposing sides on this issue. Stéphanie Chouinard is a professor of political science at Queen's University and the Royal Military College of Canada. Speer is a senior fellow at the Macdonald Laurier Institute and former advisor to Prime Minister Stephen Harper, and both of them are with us right now in studio. So thank you to the two of you. Stéphanie, I'll begin with you. As we said, a bit of a turnaround here from the Ford government announced yesterday. What's your reaction to these moves and decisions?
So it shows that the pressures that had been mounting on Mr. Ford in the past week have begun to work. Very few people were expecting that Mr. Ford would change his mind at all. So this decision last night to put out this announcement was received well, but it was also perceived as being not enough.
How so?
Yeah, so the French Language Service Commissioner will not gain his or her independence back. This is one of the main issues. The rhetoric that was used...
Because they'll be working under the auspices of the Ombudsman's office.
Exactly. So the rhetoric that was used to abolish this position to begin with was of budgetary austerity. Now that this position is being reinstated, there's absolutely no savings to be made. So members of the community are wondering, why not just go back to status quo ante? Why not just keep that office as it was? And the other problem with that is that the Ombudsman mandate is actually quite different from one of a commissioner. So yes, the commissioner will be able to receive complaints and to write reports about them, but there's a whole other side of his job that's not going to be covered under the Ombudsman, which is research and making sure that the civil servants in Ontario are well aware of best practices for French language services. And all of that is disappearing. So it's seen as quite a big loss for the community.
What's your reaction to all that, Sean?
I regret the reversal from last night for two reasons. First, I think the decisions were in and of themselves defensible. And secondly, we're going to have a budget in Ontario this late winter, early spring that's going to involve some tough choices. We have a province with the largest subnational debt in the world. We have a deficit of $15 billion. It's going to involve some tough choices. And if it can't withstand the backlash or the scrutiny that it's received on these, I think, as I said, highly defensible choices, I fear that we're going to have challenges making progress on the province's deep fiscal challenges. And so it seems to me this was an important moment to send a signal to Ontarians that this government was prepared, notwithstanding criticism, to make the tough choices to get the province's budget back on track. And I think after last night, that's an open question.
And that is the number that we keep hearing. $15 billion is what the Ford government says they are dealing with in terms of a deficit number. They are exercising this belt-tightening measures across the board. So why not Francophone services?
The question is not why not Francophone services, it's how to do it properly. At no point in time was the community ever consulted about these cuts. And we also need to remember that throughout the electoral campaign, as well as late as 3 weeks ago, both Mr. Ford and Mrs. Mulroney were on the record saying, you know, despite these cuts that are coming, you can be assured that this French language university is going to go ahead. This was one of their promises. And there was also unanimous support in the House when they were in the official opposition. So if Mr. Ford had taken the time to consult with the Franco-Ontarian community, who are by and large pretty reasonable people, and said, you know, we need to make choices. How can we make the best choices that are fiscally more conservative, but while preserving some of the services that are essential? And this conversation never happened. And this is why the outrage was so virulent starting last week.
We can quarrel with process here, but it seems to me that the fundamental question is the provincial government spends north of $600 million on official languages and bilingual program and services. So it's not to say that there isn't significant investment being made. And the choice before the government was to not proceed with the university that presently doesn't exist, and a bureaucratic position that I think, relative to the investments that they're making, is insignificant, and I would say actually is going to have less impact for official language communities on the ground than investment in community organizations and so on, which is, I think, where the bulk of the $623 million a year in official language programming and services goes. And so it seems to me, if not these choices, where is this government going to find the savings to get the province back on track? And it's for those reasons, I think, that they ought to have held the line and made the case for why these choices were right, especially when placed against the alternative.
I think the Franco-Ontarian community would take many qualms with your position. First of all, because funding community organizations is definitely not the same as funding a commissioner who is a high civil servant.
If you're a francophone in Hearst, Ontario, or somewhere else, do you think it's more important for that person to have an official languages commissioner working in Toronto who they've never met and probably don't even know who it is?
That's actually false.
Versus support for organizations on the ground?
No, this commissioner was actually meeting with community officials throughout the province. He was really well known and very well respected. And he was able to make points about efficiency of services from within the civil service. So I think Mr. Ford actually lost an ally here, someone who would have been able to help him make efficient choices instead of cutting bluntly in places where it actually really hurts.
Can I ask a question, though? How much money is the Ford government actually saving by getting rid of the office of the commissioner, as well as not starting this university? How much money, in the realm of a $15 billion deficit, how much money are they really saving here by making those cuts? I don't know if you know that, Stephanie.
When Mr. Fedeli was asked that specific question, he was actually not able to answer, which really seemed a little bit strange. You know, if you're going to make some fiscal decisions, you should at least know how much you're saving. When we're talking about the specific French Service Commissioner, we're talking about $200,000 a year that were really being saved. And now with the little backtracking that we saw last night, it's actually no savings at all. So the decision still looks a little bit weird again as to why not just go back to a full-fledged independent commissioner's office.
Yeah, and let me jump in there too, because, you know, as we talk about the dollar figures here, we know that the reverberations around the decision went well beyond Ontario's borders, as we've heard francophone communities across the country reacting, the Quebec Premier reacting to this. Sean, I'm wondering if francophone services really, when we talk about protecting minority language rights in this country, should that even be a place which the provincial government should be looking at if they're not saving a lot of money at the end of the day?
I think the short answer is yes. We've talked about the magnitude of the fiscal challenges the province face. Viewers need to remember that more than 40% of the provincial budget comes from health care. And so the question is, again, if we're going to make progress on the deficit, every area of spending needs to be subject to scrutiny and review. As I said earlier, we can quarrel with the process that got us to this place, but it seems to me if we're not prepared to make fairly insignificant reductions here, or as I said earlier, not proceed with an institution that doesn't even currently exist, it brings into question, I think, the Ford government's willingness and capacity to make real progress. Because make no mistake, these are low-hanging fruit compared to the difficult choices that this government is going to have to face in the coming weeks and months.
Okay.
And so if those tough choices are to be made, why not sit down with the community again and ask them how we can make better choices while going ahead with these fiscal restrictions? And I think that conversation, should it have had happened, would have created a much smaller backlash, actually.
Okay, well, I want to thank both of you. We're going to keep having this conversation. As you say, the budget's still coming down in late winter, early spring. Sean, Stephanie, thank you very much.
Pleasure.